crashing down. And the reason I say that is because it does have to be moved fairly often, 2 or 3 times a year. They have to raise the space station in height because the orbit does decay every time that it goes around the Earth, and it has to be moved up a little bit higher. As it comes down lower and lower, it'll enter the Earth's atmosphere more and more, and that could drag it down. And what Russia is saying is it could come down on a major city. Well, Elon Musk has just jumped in like Superman now, and he said, I'll save the day. He's prepared to send a rocket up there and do something. I don't know what.
Well, let's hope that he does come to the rescue, or that there's not a problem there. In the meantime, Dave, thanks again so much. Let's hope that we see some clear night skies soon. It's Dave Renicky. It's news time.
Currently 19 degrees in Coffs Harbour and 23 in Port Macquarie. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. A severe weather warning is in place for the Mid-North Coast, and those living in flood-prone areas are being told to make preparations for the potential of flash flooding and closed roads. A minor to moderate flood warning for the Bellinger River is in place, with moderate flooding possible at Thora and minor levels likely at Bellingen. Minor flood warnings have also been issued for the Clarence and Orara rivers. SCS Mid-North Coast Controller Steve Lawrence says there is concern for the lower Mid-North Coast, and crews are on standby to respond to the incidents.
Given the traditionally unpredictable nature of these systems, the modelling changes from day to day. So we're asking people to be prepared now and to plan for possible flooding over the course of Monday. We'll be ready to respond together with our other emergency service partners should the situation escalate.
The Pacific Highway has reopened in both directions between New Italy and West Ballina after being closed due to flooding. Meanwhile, access to Somerville's Road off Waterfall Way has also been reopened after it was briefly closed yesterday. Somerville Road is restricted to light vehicles, emergency services and utility providers undertaking essential travel, and Waterfall Way remains closed between Thora and Dorrigo due to major landslides. Oxley MP Melinda Pavey says work is continuing to make Waterfall Way safer as part of a $50 million funding package.
It's not just about getting rid of the soil on that landslip. It is ensuring that we put major bits of infrastructure known as big nails, steel nails, into the side of the hill to give it more strength and to stabilise it to avoid these landslips.
A contingent of soldiers from Adelaide arrived in Coffs Harbour to be sent to flood-affected parts of the northern rivers. The contingent of about 100 soldiers from the Australian Defence Force is expected to be deployed to areas around Mullumbimby and west of Byron Bay. Major Thomas Bittner is the officer commanding the 1st Armoured Regiment Support Contingent. He says the soldiers will be linking up with the North Coast 41st Battalion, which has been on the ground helping Lismore since the disaster began.
The majority of them are reservists. So they are actually people that live in the community, and a lot of them have been directly impacted by the floods themselves, but they've been giving up their time to obviously put on the uniform and help out the community where they can.
A War Hope farmer has organised a fodder run to the North Coast over the weekend. About 500 hay bales on 13 semi-trailers left the War Hope showground and arrived in Lismore yesterday. The fodder run coordinator Andrew Carroll says he's working with the NOR cooperative at Lismore and Casino to carry out deliveries directly to affected farmers. Mr. Carroll says he wanted to pay back the support that his community received after last year's flood and the 2019 bushfires.
People out of the goodness of their heart from places we'd never heard of had come on board and helped us out. So we've had a reasonably good season. Unfortunately, it's been a bit wet, so no one's been able to get silage off paddocks. But what silage they have had, no one's hesitated to be able to throw in a few bales and make up these loads to be able to help someone else out that's in need.
Around 200 Crescent Head locals rallied yesterday against a proposal to ban off-leash dog walking and public access at several local beaches. Under a National Parks and Wildlife Service review, several beaches at Crescent Head will be reclassified as national parks. President of the Crescent Head Dog and Walkers Group, Jane Eason, says many groups in the community are outraged by the lack of consultation.
people who ride horses aren't allowed to ride horses on the beach. The beekeepers are concerned the commercial fishers could be affected. We started off with the simple thought of being able to walk your dog on the beach, and then we found that the entire community is affected.
In news elsewhere, a second attempt to evacuate 200,000 civilians from the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol has failed. The local city council called off the evacuation attempt after it said Russian forces continued shelling in breach of the agreement. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Ukrainian nationalists were to blame. To the weather, cloudy and a very high chance of showers today, as well as the chance of a thunderstorm which may lead to flash flooding from this afternoon. A top of 27 degrees across Coffs Harbour, 26 in Kempsey, 24 in Port Macquarie and Taree, and 23 degrees in Foster. This is ABC News.
Coordinating teams in damage assessments. A huge job in the Northern Rivers at the moment, with over 2,000 properties literally condemned and uninhabitable. Are you with ABC Radio Mid-North and Coffs Coast? We'll continue our flood coverage after the news, but right now it is news time, 7:30.
Showers and some possible heavy falls today, with rivers swollen once again. Good morning, Melissa Martin with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. There are warnings for possible major flooding across the Macleay region this morning, with fears the Kempsey levee may overtop. The State Emergency Service issued an evacuation warning overnight for Kempsey and low-lying areas of the Macleay Valley. The river is expected to peak at the moderate flood level around 10 a.m. in Kempsey this morning and may reach a major flood level around 3 p.m. SES Deputy Incident Controller Graham Craig says the Kempsey CBD and Eden Street areas, including low-lying properties east of the railway north to Fredericton, have been told evacuation may be necessary.
That's based on some major flood heights in the Kempsey area that will result in isolations and potential risk of overtop of the levee on the latest intelligence we've had from the Bureau of Meteorology.
Long-term Kempsey resident and cafe owner Lou Kesby says the CBD has been making preparations this morning.
You've got to lift everything you can that you want to save, otherwise you lose it all, of course, when you look at what happened in Lismore. You put them up high, as high as you can, and hope for the best. But as I said, fortunately, we haven't had water in our shop for 38 years, but there are a lot of low-lying shops around that have to pack up.
The New South Wales Regional Roads Minister Sam Faraway has defended the 5-day closure of the Pacific Highway on the Mid-North and North Coast, despite billions of dollars spent on the upgrading of the roadway in recent years. The closure limited access for essentials and other relief to be delivered to flood-affected areas last week. The stretch of the highway between Grafton and the Queensland border fully reopened over the weekend. Mr Faraway says road authorities worked as quickly as possible to ensure the reopening of the major corridor.
You've got these 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 year events. The infrastructure is never going to cope. And I think considering the size of this event, how quickly we were able to then get that road opened in sections and now completely opened, I accept that obviously you can always do better.
The clean-up effort continues in flood-affected communities along the Clarence River, despite minor and some moderate flooding still remaining in the valley. Rural Fire Service and SES volunteers from across the state are working alongside police and the local council to assist affected residents. Water has begun to recede from inundated homes over the weekend, particularly around Ulmarra and Brushgrove, just north of Grafton, but some remain cut off. RFS volunteer Steve Gibbs says volunteers have been crucial to the flood response and recovery.
We've just been going around basically knocking on doors of houses and providing what assistance people want. Everything from moving goods out of their homes to washing their garages and sheds out to providing water, just having a chat. It just depends on what they need.
The Nambucca Valley Council says it's vital the state government provide assistance to raise the houses of hundreds of properties in flood-prone areas. The council is calling for expressions of interest from affected homeowners as part of its application for the government's floodplain management program. The Nambucca Valley Mayor, Rhonda Hoban, says she expects strong community interest in the program after more than 300 homes were affected by flooding last March. She says raising houses is one of many ways the council is working to mitigate against future floods.
Given the number of floods that we've had, it's just something that people have got to take seriously. All of the science tells us that this is going to happen more often, and we really need to address it. House raising is one of the things that can be done.
In news elsewhere this morning, authorities have issued more than a dozen flood evacuation orders overnight as intense weather hits Sydney. People in areas including Chipping Norton, Georges Hall, Holsworthy, Milperra and Warwick Farm have been told to leave their homes. The Defence Force says hundreds more troops, heavy equipment and helicopters will arrive in the flood-devastated Northern Rivers region in the following days, and Queensland has recorded a 13th flood death with the discovery of a man's body in floodwaters southwest of Brisbane. To the weather, a severe weather warning is current for the lower mid-north coast for heavy rainfall which may lead to flash flooding. Elsewhere, showers, most likely in the south of the region. A major flood warning is current for the Macleay River. Moderate flooding is likely at Grafton and Cootes Crossing this morning, and there are minor warnings for the Manning, Hastings, Bellinger and Nambucca rivers. To hear today's local news, search online for ABC Local and look for your local station.
Because we needed to build up our breeding numbers to be able to have a good, secure population in captivity. Going into next year, we believe there'll be adequate numbers to be able to start putting them back. So the main location we're going to start putting them back is above Chaffey Dam. That was part of an offset agreement area for the raising of Chaffey Dam, and presently there's no Burralong frogs there, so we'll put some back there in what we consider to be optimal bits of habitat. But outside of that, where we can sort of keep putting them back, I really doubt that they're going to be able to get back to anything like they used to be. They'd need a lot of good years to be able to breed up and recolonise all that area. So there used to be about 100 kilometres of stream that they used to occupy, whereas now I've only found them in about 1 kilometre. So it's how the time frame needed to get them back to what they were, I really think might be a thing of the past, and it's going to come down to monitoring and with a finger of the pulse and regulating the captive breeding to be able to maintain them.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation, but we do hope that returning them to the wild next year does provide some cause for optimism, but it is a very difficult situation. Phil Spark, thanks for joining us and sharing your insight into this morning.
No worries. Thank you. Bye.
That is Phil Spark, wildlife ecologist there, talking Burralong frogs. Couple of thoughts coming through on the text line. I'll read them out shortly, but now it's news time.
ABC News for New England Northwest. Good morning, I'm Kemi Maguire. Masks are no longer mandatory for primary school and early education staff from today. Staff in specific purpose schools will still be required to wear masks based on public health advice. Education Minister Sarah Mitchell says it's the first time since the pandemic that majority of students have enjoyed this level of normality. The New South Wales Bushfire Coronial Inquiry will today begin to examine the deaths of 5 people from the New England region who died during the 2019 to 2020 bushfires. Jessica Clifford reports.
The New South Wales coroner will investigate the cause and origin of 8 bushfires in the New England region during the 2019-20 summer and 5 deaths associated with those fires over the course of the next 2 weeks. The inquiry was due to sit in Armidale, however, due to COVID-19, will sit remotely in Sydney. Today, an inquiry into the Kangawalla fire will be opened, along with inquests into the deaths of Vivian Chaplin and George Knoll, who died on November 8, 2019. Miss Chaplin died while defending her Waitalaba home, while Mr Knoll's body was discovered in a burnt-out car on the fire ground.
The recruitment process to staff the federal election is underway, with 100,000 temporary jobs now advertised across the country. Most of the jobs are available on election day itself, while a portion of roles are available for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people only. 871 positions are available for the seat of New England and 885 in Parkes. The Electoral Commission's New South Wales manager, Rebecca Main, says it's more jobs than usual.
Given, the environment that we're in, we're expecting that we're going to need more people in terms of hygiene officers at the polling places, in terms of queue controllers. So we're really just ramping up as soon as we can. I mean, we're expecting the election sometime in May, so here's a perfect time to get out there and get people registered.
The Glen Innes and Emmaville public pools will now be free on weekends throughout this month, thanks to an unusual money saver. A car assigned to the mayoral position inside the Glen Innes 7 Council has been sold, with majority of its revenue allocated to the swimming centres, amounting to more than $11,000. Mayor Rob Bannum says although it's coming to the end of the warmer season, the car was a waste of ratepayer funds.
I don't believe I need a vehicle. I've got my Land Cruiser here. I can drive around. I'm pretty happy with that. Well, there's always been a vehicle allocated for the mayor to use, and I just said, look, I don't need that. It was a brand new car, and it can go into the pool. And we've sold one of the older cars, and that's the proceeds from that has covered the cost of this.
Local dairy farmers say the first few months of 2022 have treated them well, with good seasonal conditions and higher milk prices. Wes Brown is a dairy farmer near Tamworth and says recent rainfall has been helpful to grow and store fodder for his herd as a backup security. He says the extra feed has opened opportunities for local producers, such as expanding their operations.
We're trying to increase our numbers, and we will be. We've got some more heifers to calve. Once we get our autumn feed in and start feeding that off, our production will go up, and hopefully we can get that good price for our milk as well.
And commuters travelling from the coast to New England are urged to use the Gwydir and Oxley highways as Waterfall Way remains closed. The route, which connects Armidale to the east, has been blocked by a landslide between Thora and Dorrigo since mid-February. Oxley MP Melinda Pavey says Transport New South Wales is continuing to clear debris from the site.
It's not just about getting rid of the soil on that landslip. It is ensuring that we put major bits of infrastructure known as big nails, steel nails, into the side of the hill to give it more strength and to stabilise it to avoid these landslips.
A severe weather warning has been issued for the New England northwest. Heavy rainfall, which may lead to flash flooding, is forecasted for towns including Tamworth and Gunnedah. The Bureau of Meteorology says thunderstorms are likely to bring rainfall totals up to between 70 and 120 mils throughout today. Tamworth heading for a top of 24, 30 in Moree, 29 in Narrabri, Inverell expecting a maximum of 27 degrees, 23 in Glen Innes and 22 in Armidale. ABC News.
30 news time.
ABC News for New England Northwest. Good morning, I'm Kemi Maguire. The New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry, has heard details about the 20 minutes in which a bushfire ripped through Waitalaba. Jessica Clifford reports.
Waitalaba residents received an emergency bushfire text at 4:50 p.m. on November 8, 2019, but by 5:10 the blaze had destroyed 20 properties, including the school, and killed one person. A second person died of her injuries the next day. Witnesses told the court the fire had been listed as contained, but due to extreme weather had jumped containment lines. Police investigators indicated the likely cause of the fire was a lightning strike on October 26, 2019. The inquiry continues today.
The company behind a new solar farm near Armidale says it's working hard to source both local labour and materials to build the site. The state government has signed off on the Tilbuster solar farm, which will make enough energy to power more than 56,000 homes a year. Managing Director of Enerpark, Benjamin Hanning, says they plan to start construction next year with as much local input as possible.
It's not just the labour itself, but also for a lot of the civil construction side of things, including fencing and including building of roads. We can source a lot of those things locally.
Power has been turned on to high-tech lights worth about $1.2 million on 3 ovals across the Guida. Cricket-grade LED luminaires have been installed at Nicholson Oval in Warialda, along with the Showgrounds and Guida Oval in Bingara, wrapping up the 12-month project. The council's governance officer, Casey McClymont, says the spotlights also come with features such as controlled lighting via mobile.
The benefit of these particular lights is that they're dimmable. So we can have preset specifications depending on what the sport is or the event is that's being played. So every time the lights go on, it doesn't mean that they're going on at the maximum lighting level.
A competition is giving students from the New England Northwest a chance to see the impacts of differing environments have on sheep and wool production. 6 weathers are each being given so the pupils can care for the animals before they are entered in a national sale in August. About 10 schools from the region are taking part, with spokeswoman Anne Ernie saying it's particularly valuable for students from areas that don't produce a large amount of sheep.
They have no sheep in their region, and they've used the sheep as a learning tool with their kids in textiles. They've actually learnt about the wool industry and go through the process of what happens to the fleece, that contact with livestock. It's invaluable.
Feral pests have been top of the agenda at a recent meeting with Gulf Creek farmers near Bingara. Landholders are being urged to track the sambar deer more thoroughly on their properties. Professional trapper Mark Lamb says the species is listed as one of Australia's top invasive pests, with reports the deer may be spreading north from southern parts of the country.
So I know there's been a couple shot around the Tamworth area and south of Tamworth. So another problem we do see with deer, though, is quite often they're misinterpreted as a species. There are 6 species in it, and unless you know all the indicators, it can be hard to determine what species you're looking at.
And women's advocate Dimity Smith says there's a lot that needs to be done inside workplaces to make them safer and more inclusive. The Tamworth Local has won the Future Women New South Wales Rural Scholarship as part of International Women's Day today. Ms Smith says as this year's theme focuses on break the bias, many corporate and rural industries can put in place stronger policies for women.
I honestly think the buck stops with every individual, and I think that we have a choice to break our own biases, particularly for International Women's Day. I mean, that's the theme, and I think where are the biases that you have? And sometimes it's really about identifying them. I think there's so much that can be done.
Moderate flooding is occurring on the Barwon River in Mungandai, with major flooding likely to peak today at 7.2 metres. The Macleay River at Georges Creek peaked overnight at a major flood level of 9.8 metres and is currently falling. High chance of thunderstorms are expected today across the northwest slopes and plains and southern parts of the northern tablelands, which may lead to flash flooding. Tamworth heading for a top of 27 today, 33 in Moree, 30 in Narrabri, Inverell 29 and 24 degrees expected in Glen Innes and Armidale. ABC News.
I'm on my way. We're on our way to the 6:30 news, by the way. That's coming up for you. I was really interested to read that pads and tampons are going to be given out for free in New South Wales public schools after a trial in 30-something schools.
Yes.
Finally, yeah?
Yes. Why not? Why not? Girls, young women, they need them. This can help. The government can do it. They're doing it. We've had it trialled in a couple of our local schools, made a big difference there. It's going to all be happening before the middle of the year. Every school in New South Wales getting these, pads and tampons being dispensed in the girls' toilets. It's all being announced ahead of International Women's Day, which, as you heard, is tomorrow. I'm sure it'll make a big difference in our local schools.
Screaming Jets or Sammy White, Demi Mitchell
and Morgan Evans.
ABC Newcastle. Supporting your local.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC News. There have been 38 flood rescues across New South Wales in the past 24 hours. Heavy rain has fallen overnight and more is on the way from the mid-north coast through to the Illawarra region. An evacuation order is in place for parts of the Hawkesbury region near Londonderry. Adam Jones from the State Emergency Service says they've had several calls for help from Sydney's west and northwest.
We've had 80 jobs come in through in the Hawkesbury area, about 114 in that Penrith area, and 60 in that Hills, and 54 in that Blue Mountains. So it really is concentrating up into that Western Sydney and then up into the mountains.
The UN's Human Rights Monitoring Mission says at least 364 civilians have been killed in the first 10 days of the war in Ukraine. Europe correspondent Steve Kinane reports.
That figure of 364 civilian deaths, which the UN believes will be considerably higher, includes 13 children. Another 759 civilians were injured. The UN says the majority of deaths and injuries were caused by the use of explosive weapons with a wide impact area, including shelling from heavy artillery and multi-launch rocket systems and missile and airstrikes. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it claimed it would only target military infrastructure with high-precision weapons. Steve Kinane, ABC News.
A new base will be built on Australia's east coast to support the future nuclear submarine fleet, with Brisbane, Newcastle and Port Kembla selected as possible locations. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
The Prime Minister will unveil plans for a new nuclear-powered submarine base in a national security speech today, where he'll warn of a new arc of autocracy following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Australia's fleet of 6 Collins-class submarines are based at Perth's HMAS Stirling, while also operating out of Sydney's Garden Island Naval Base. The shortlisted sites for the new nuclear base are Brisbane, Newcastle and Port Kembla, which the ABC has been told is Defence's preferred option.
Nobby's Surf Life Saving Club members are in disbelief after a motor for its rescue boat was stolen. On Friday night, a volunteer noticed a padlock had been cut off 2 locked sheds, leading him to find the motor of a rubber duck set up for flood rescues was missing. The motor is worth more than $3,000. It can only be used on a surf rescue boat and is registered to Surf Life Saving New South Wales. Life member Andrew Griffiths says police are investigating.
They're sealed motors, so if it ever tries to get serviced, they'll see straight away that it's a stolen motor. And it's just devastating that we were on standby, and we're still on standby, and to have someone steal a motor in a time like this, you just can't understand some people.
A nurse unit manager at Belmont's emergency department has been recognised as Swansea's 2022 Local Woman of the Year. Fiona Mitchell also works at the GP Access After Hours service and was involved in setting up the cardiac ward at John Hunter Hospital. She left nursing to pursue photography when her family moved to Singapore, but upon her return to Australia, she says leading is what she was born to do.
That's where I've really found my passion for managing people and leadership of a team, but leadership that looks like real compassionate, kind, understanding, supportive leadership. I don't think really what I do is amazing. It's just my job.
Midwife, author and LGBTIQ+ advocate Oceane Campbell has been named Newcastle's 2022 Local Woman of the Year, while Barbara Heckman has been recognised for her contribution to the Maitland community. To sport now, and in men's A-League soccer, Newcastle Jets coach Arthur Pappas says despite the weekend's loss, his team is playing good football. The Jets went down 2-1 to Western United following an attempt at a late comeback. Angus Thurgate scored in the final 10 minutes, but they missed the chance to equalise. Pappas says it's hard to accept this loss.
They go in front and they make it difficult for teams, but I don't think also they've been in a position where a team comes at them so hard for the period of the game that we kept going. You know, there was possibilities there, and also they had a couple of opportunities because we opened ourselves up on the counter, but that's part and parcel of being behind and chasing the game as well.
A severe weather warning for heavy rainfall is in place across the Hunter today. A hazardous surf warning has also been issued. A top of 23 expected in Newcastle, Maitland and Singleton. ABC News.
Recipient. Yesterday we filled you in on a couple of the other women in other state electorates who've received this award, but we're so thrilled for Dr. Bailey. We've spoken to her many times through the course of the pandemic about the hard work they've been doing educating the community, getting vaccinations out.
So, with today being International Women's Day, she's being acknowledged for the hard work, the hours that she has put in at the Raymond Terrace Respiratory Clinic, and she's done a wonderful job. So, thank you to all the women in our region who work hard every day and aren't acknowledged. But today, we're thinking of you and acknowledging you.
Getting out and about? Take Turdo to Glenrock. Bike the Fernley with Jen. Walk Lakeside with Dan. Maybe a Wattagans weekend with Hamo. If you're getting active, get the app. ABC Newcastle. Streaming live 24/7 on the ABC Listen app.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC News. Residents across many suburbs in Sydney's southwest have been forced to abandon their homes overnight after a flood emergency. The State Emergency Service issued evacuation orders for suburbs including Chipping Norton, Georges Hall, Picnic Point, Pleasure Point, Sandy Point, Lansvale, Holsworthy, Milperra, Moorebank and Warwick Farm. SES spokesperson Sandy Smythe says there was no time to issue warnings. She says crews were door-knocking homes after midnight, telling people to leave.
Options are, go and stay with family and friends or look for accommodation outside those flood areas. Or there are some evacuation centres that have been set up in that area.
Parts of Camden were also evacuated. With at least 2,000 homes in the Northern Rivers region declared too flood damage to live in, the Premier has warned that number will rise. Jean Kennedy reports the Defence Force commander coordinating the recovery effort has apologised to those who felt abandoned while pleading to be rescued.
The head of the Defence Force's Joint Task Force, Major General David Tomei, defended delays in flood rescues and getting in critical supplies, saying that dangerous conditions prevented access.
I'm very sorry for all of those people who have felt that they haven't been supported, and I empathise completely with their plight.
At least 2,000 homes have so far been declared uninhabitable, and the Premier has told Triple J's Hack that figure will grow.
By the way, this is very early days. It's going to be a lot more uninhabitable.
He says he's now focused on devising a housing plan which will be delivered shortly.
A truckload of donations from the Upper Hunter is being prepared to be taken to northern New South Wales for the flood recovery. Nellie Witt decided to organise donations while working and visiting family in the Upper Hunter last week. She lives in Lismore but grew up in Muswellbrook. Ms Witt says she received a huge response after putting a call out for help on social media.
Every day I've just had hundreds of messages and people tagging me and things from Muswellbrook who have been involved. It's just been absolutely incredible. We're going to run some much needed pet supplies as well as toiletries and baby naps and food and some clothing and, all those essential survival things to get through.
Dungog Shire Council has established an evacuation centre should it be needed due to flooding. The centre is located at the Dungog Memorial RSL Club on Lord Street and will be staffed 24 hours a day. Animal safe places have also opened at the Gresford Showground and Dungog Sale Yards for any pet owners and producers who need to evacuate stock. The Weather Bureau says there is minor flooding occurring along the Williams River at Dungog, which peaked at 6.25 metres early this morning and is now falling. The US believes Russia has now committed nearly 100% of the forces it had amassed around Ukraine's borders to the conflict. Here's North America correspondent Carrington Clark.
A senior defence official says there is no indication Russia is preparing to move additional forces from elsewhere in the country to shore up what it has already utilised. The United States is sending 500 more of its troops to Europe to support its NATO allies. The extra troops mean there will soon be roughly 100,000 US military personnel stationed in Europe. The US says it stands ready to provide American-made jets to Poland if Poland were to send Soviet-made jets to Ukraine. But Poland has not yet indicated it would be willing to make the trade. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
A man who impersonated a Hunter teacher to groom a schoolgirl has been sentenced to a maximum 6.5 years jail. Gerard Daniel Lazarus pleaded guilty to grooming 2 girls over an 8-year period. The district court heard he lured one of them into chatting on an online confessional app while pretending to be her teacher. That teacher was investigated by Australian Federal Police and cleared, but has told the ABC he now suffers anxiety and PTSD. Lazarus won't be eligible for release until 2026. And briefly in surfing, Brazilian surfer Tatiana Weston Webb has won the World Surf League event in Portugal. The 25-year-old beat American Lakey Peterson in the final by barely a point. A severe weather warning for damaging winds and heavy rainfall has been issued for the Hunter today. Newcastle, Maitland and Singleton are all expecting a top of 27 degrees. ABC News.
Tweed River, a washed out causeway and a major landslip outside Mavis's kitchen. But that community is doing really well. They said they've got too much food. They're getting storage problems.
What about south of Yukai and south? I was going to ask you about Yukai and those areas further south to Mount Burrell.
Yeah, Yukai's doing a fantastic job. They've always been on top of it out there. The RFS brigade out there's done a massive job checking the more remote communities up at Rollins Creek and Chowan Creek. So yeah, they're in pretty good shape. As we speak, I'm standing on the balcony at Timbalgum, the community action team leader's place, looking at Mount Warning in the distance. I'm glad I can see it. Wasn't too happy about that rain last night. But yeah, so the community here in Timbalgum, they've done a massive job as well. They're getting everything slowly cleaned up, and I'm pretty sure everybody will be welcome when the council tip gets reopened and they can start all the rubbish removal.
Indeed. And just before I let you go, South Murwillumbah, what's the latest?
Yeah, we've got road access down there. We've had that for quite some time. We've had fantastic support from the Army. As Janet Pettit said a little bit earlier on, if you see Army people walking around taking photos, they're not taking selfies. They're doing rapid damage assessments of all the buildings. We're hoping that they'll finish South Moolumbar, south of Alma Street this morning. And then they'll be focusing on the industrial area and heading up to Condong to continue that work so that we've got a bit of a better idea of how many buildings are damaged and what sort of infrastructure has been impacted.
All right. Thank you so much indeed.
No worries, Joe. Bye.
Jack Frost from Murwillumbah, SES. Time for the news. Good morning, Bronwyn Herbert with ABC North Coast News. An additional 600 Defence Force personnel have arrived in the Northern Rivers to help with the mammoth cleanup after the region's worst flood in its history. Madeline Cross reports.
The Lismore Mayor Steve Krieg says the city will survive, but needs the government to commit funding to reshaping the flood mitigation in the region. He wants funding for a levee to be raised on both sides of the river and for tight bends and curves to be dredged out. Dozens of schools on the North Coast have also been affected by this natural disaster after being cut off or severely damaged.
The Insurance Council of Australia says more than 10,000 claims have already been lodged in New South Wales after severe flooding. Most of the claims relate to damage to houses and vehicles. Lisa Cable from the Insurance Council is advising people affected by flooding to prioritise health and safety when assessing property damage.
Electricity is super important to be aware of. Don't switch your power on until it's been inspected by an electrician. You can start your claims process before you get back to your property. If you're currently in an evacuation centre, give your insurer a call.
Essential Energy says it will take about another fortnight for the Lismore CBD to have power reconnected. More than 7,000 residential and business customers are still without electricity, predominantly in Lismore and Ballina. There are some small pockets of the Tweed, the Clarence and Richmond Valley that don't have electricity back on. Community Relations Manager for Essential Energy, Raylene Myers, says there are significant access challenges getting power reconnected to the Lismore CBD.
It will take a little while to get the power back on to the CBD in Lismore because a lot of the network is actually underground. So it is very time consuming for our crews to actually get underground and traverse that underground network throughout the CBD.
Crews are continuing to work on restoring outages across the NBN network in northern New South Wales. Around 9,500 people are affected by the current outages. NBN Local General Manager Chris Cusack says the good news is that the Woodburn fibre access node was repaired late yesterday. Mr Cusack says he does understand how frustrated people are by the lack of services.
This has been a really difficult time for everyone, so the sooner that we can recover services, the better, and we can understand the frustration in the community as well. We are working as hard and as fast as we possibly can, and we're doing that in a safe way as well, because the last thing we need is to create any other challenges for emergency services where they've got to come and rescue us.
A spokesman from Transport Management New South Wales says the Pacific Highway is now open. The Ballina-Glenugie section had been closed for a week due to extensive flooding. The Ballina Mayor says residents impacted by the flood disaster are worried of more rain for the region. Mayor Sharon Cadwallader says crews have been working hard to clear the damage, but says West and South Ballina and Wardell are still areas of concern. She says the forecast of more rain is making people nervous. Councillor Cadwallader is praising the work of volunteers, but is asking for more help for the elderly.
I've been directing people to the aged care facilities to volunteer because a lot of the staff there have been affected by the floods. I've had stories of staff working 30-hour shifts. Just help volunteers that are double vaccinated and can just help with delivering meals and things like that.
A South Lismore resident says she and her neighbours will be meeting with Boral today to get more information about an oily residue that spread over their homes during the flood from a defunct asphalt plant in the area. Marion Conroy says the substance is now coating her walls and everything in her house and is impossible to shift. Ms Conroy says she has been advised by the SES not to go inside.
They've told me it's a hazmat zone, so technically we're not allowed in the house, and they said there's a hazmat team coming to look at it in the next week. It really is toxic in there. I am trying to salvage a couple of things. I'd like to get my grandmother jewellery.
The ABC has contacted Boral for a response. To the weather for the Northern Rivers, partly cloudy, a medium chance of showers becoming less likely this evening, the chance of a thunderstorm and possibly severe with heavy rain, which may lead to flash flooding and damaging winds. Daytime top temperatures around 30 degrees. ABC News.
To start trying to get it across to a couple of evacuation centres out of Wildrella Road and up to Nullarbor, I think, and to Casino and Corokai today to try and do my workshop and my office is just basically a drop-off centre, so I can't work anyway.
Oh, Bruce, thank you for all you're doing in a crisis yourself, but still lending a hand. Thank you.
No, not a problem at all. Thanks very much for talking to us, and I hope everyone out there that's listening is safe and well, and we will get over this. It's going to take a long, long time, but Lismore's a fairly resilient type of city, and we will bounce back. And I'm sure a lot of people won't think that at the moment, but down the track, we'll survive and back on our feet and get back to Lismore with the beautiful city that it is.
Absolutely. Bruce Chief, thank you.
No worries. Thanks very much. Okay, bye.
Bruce Chief, South Lismore local president of the Lismore City Lions Club, and doing a stellar effort over there. It's news time.
Good morning, Emma Rennie with ABC News. The federal opposition has criticised the Prime Minister for showing a lack of leadership in the wake of the Northern Rivers flood emergency. State and federal Labor representatives visited Lismore yesterday. Deputy Labor leader Richard Miles says the region needs significant investment to recover and rebuild.
So what's absolutely critical and what is not present right now is national leadership. It's absolutely critical that we have national leadership on the ground which is providing a response for people.
Owners of flood-ravaged buildings across the Northern Rivers are being reassured they won't necessarily be condemned. Premier Dominic Perrottet had said 2,000 buildings throughout Lismore had been deemed not habitable after being assessed by the SES and Australian Defence Force. But Lismore City Council General Manager John Walker says many of those buildings will be repairable.
There is no need to panic. They are not condemned. But please go and get a builder, go and get a structural engineer and have that properly done. And I'm sure that in the great majority of cases, people will not have to worry.
Volunteers have managed to restore communications to some isolated communities west of Mullumbimby by hiking in their own satellite internet technology. Authorities are working to restore services and road access around Wilsons Creek, Wanganui, Huonbrook and Main Arm. Fraser Walker, who trekked into the area with his own satellite dish, says the infrastructure is vital.
We can look after a 5 square kilometre area off one Starlink with 2A radios, and that keeps everyone in contact, and the safety that allows is massive.
Telstra Regional General Manager Mike Maram says services have been restored to 34 sites in 72 hours, and the focus now is on smaller communities without communications.
Our crews are continuing to work, particularly around those smaller communities that are still in communication isolation, and there's still 17 of those, so they're our number one priority at the moment.
A volunteer at the Southern Cross University Evacuation Centre says there's several positive cases of COVID among the evacuees, and 2 volunteers she knows have tested positive. Volunteer and former Mayor Jenny Dow says the COVID positive evacuees are being cared for in a separate area with specialised staff. She says the evacuation centre volunteers are wearing masks and taking rapid antigen tests to avoid any spread of disease.
Many of the people staying at these evacuation centres are elderly. Many of them have compromised health. So it's really important we as volunteers don't spread COVID to them.
A clean-up effort is underway in flood-affected communities along the Clarence River despite minor flooding in the valley. RFS and SES volunteers from across the state are working alongside police and the council to assist affected residents. RFS volunteer Steve Gibbs says volunteers have been crucial to the flood response and recovery.
We've just been going around basically knocking on doors of houses and providing what assistance people want. Everything from moving goods out of their homes to washing their garages and sheds out to providing water, just having a chat. It just depends on what they need.
A North Coast regional school leader says it's heartbreaking to see the flood damage done to schools. The Catholic Diocese of Lismore includes 45 schools and more than half have been flood affected from Woodburn to South Murwillumbah. Regional Services leader John Wilson says around 19,000 students are still not back at school.
Oh, look, it's heartbreaking, to be honest. We have so many schools and classrooms that have been affected. We've had 3 schools fully inundated, and this school at St Carthage's, where a number of classrooms have been affected.
Fire and Rescue New South Wales is calling on business and property owners to be mindful of hazardous materials during the clean-up. Northern Rivers Duty Commander Paul Collis says there's been a very large number of hazmat call-outs so far. He says he's expecting more as the recovery continues.
Hazardous materials are everywhere and in a lot of these premises, and we're basically relying upon the occupants to let us know when they come across things. It's a significant amount of effort and resources for us to make it safe for them.
ABC News.
We hope you have a wonderful day there at Charlestown South, kicking off a new week. What are we, week 5 maybe, term 1?
I think we're up to week 7.
Oh gosh, it's flown. Well done. Have a great time at Charlestown South today. News is on the way.
84 years of steel making in Newcastle will finish in less than 3 weeks.
What's it like for you now looking up at it and knowing that it's never going to happen again?
Memories. 90 years of news. ABC Newcastle, your local. Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with the ABC Hunter News. Port Kembla is emerging as the most likely site for a new base to accommodate Australia's future nuclear-powered submarine fleet, but Newcastle is also being considered. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
In a virtual address to the Lowy Institute, the Prime Minister will today announce a new nuclear-powered submarine base on the East Coast. Australia's fleet of 6 Collins-class submarines are based at Perth's HMAS Stirling, while also operating out of Sydney's Garden Island Naval Base. The shortlisted sites for the new base are Brisbane, Newcastle and Port Kembla, which the ABC's been told is Defence's preferred option. In his speech, Scott Morrison will also warn of a new arc of autocracy following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Moderate flooding is occurring along the Wollombi Brook at Bulga. The Weather Bureau says major flooding is possible later today, with heavy rainfall forecast in the area until Tuesday. It may result in further rises along the Hunter River. Minor flooding is also likely along the Lower Hunter at Singleton and Maitland. Fire and Rescue New South Wales says several residents living near the old Wickham wool stores have reported asbestos concerns. A large fire that tore through 2 warehouses last week has released asbestos in the area, and authorities are working to reduce the spread. Demolition of the burnt buildings continued over the weekend. Superintendent Luke Unsworth says hazardous materials have been their focus.
We're working alongside some asbestos removal contractors to clean down all the hard surfaces of properties within the immediate area. We're also undertaking the assessment of other properties in a broader area where residents have registered their concerns with the EPA.
Islington Public School will remain closed today and for the foreseeable future as the fire cleanup continues. It's been non-operational since Wednesday last week, and students are being asked to learn from home today. From tomorrow, alternative schools have been arranged for students to continue classroom learning. Year groups will be split between Ties Hill, Mayfield East, Waratah and Waratah West public schools, as well as Callaghan College at Waratah. A midwife, author and LGBTIQ+ advocate has been named the 2022 Newcastle Local Woman of the Year. OCN Campbell was pregnant with her 3rd child during the pandemic and has helped a lot of COVID-positive women give birth. She wrote a book with her mother, weaving their diary entries together about mental health, a suicide attempt, their strained relationship and coming out the other side. OCN has also been instrumental in ensuring same-sex couples are supported during pregnancy and says it's come a long way.
We had great care. I know that other people didn't get that same experience, and I did a lot of work. I did a research project and a lot of conference presentations and training for healthcare professionals providing antenatal education and birth support to same-sex couples.
Nurse Unit Manager at Belmont Hospital, Fiona Mitchell, has been named Swansea's 2022 Local Woman of the Year, while Barbara Heckman has been recognised for her contribution to the Maitland community. Nobby Surf Life Saving Club members are in disbelief after a motor for their rescue boat was stolen. On Friday night, a volunteer noticed a padlock had been cut off 2 locked sheds, leading him to find the motor of a rubber duck set up for flood rescues was missing. The motor is worth more than $3,000. It can only be used on a surf rescue boat and is registered to Surf Life Saving New South Wales. Life member Andrew Griffiths says police are investigating.
They're sealed motors, so if it ever tries to get serviced, they'll see straight away that it's a stolen motor. And it's just devastating that we were on standby, and we're still on standby, and to have someone steal a motor in a time like this, you just can't understand some people.
In the NRLW, Newcastle Knights captain Romy Teetsall says her team continues to improve every time they play. The Knights lost 28-10 to competition frontrunners, the Brisbane Broncos, yesterday, battling wet and windy conditions in Wollongong. Teetsall says everyone gave it their all.
The girls' effort, you couldn't fault it. Everyone put in 100%. Obviously, the Broncos are a really experienced pack, and errors in the middle are going to always hurt coming out of yardage. So I think just little improvements there and getting on the front foot and being able to compete in attack will absolutely improve our game.
Very high chance of rain across the Hunter today, the chance of a thunderstorm as well. Newcastle heading for a top of 23, Maitland 23 as well.
Dog, yeah, a real dog. It's a white one. Bit of a diva? A bit of a diva, yeah. Yeah, we had its costume fitting the other day, and the contractual arrangements that we have with the dog is just excruciating.
Never work with kids or animals. Isn't that what they say? Daniel Stoddart loves a challenge, though, the founder of Hunter Drama, putting on Oliver at the Civic Theatre. Get your tickets via the Civic Theatre website.
Opening night is on Thursday. There are 6 performances, so check it out. More rain expected on the way. You'll hear from the SES in the next half hour.
Take the Anzac Memorial Walk or a lakeside stroll. Wherever you go, take ABC Newcastle with you. Streaming 24/7 on the ABC Listen app.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with the ABC Hunter News. Independent Senator Rex Patrick says Newcastle has been included on the shortlist for a future submarine base purely for pork barrelling reasons in the lead up to the federal election. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced Newcastle, Port Kembla and Brisbane were being considered for the new submarine base to accommodate a nuclear-powered fleet. But Senator Patrick has told RN Breakfast the Port of Newcastle has a difficult entry and is an extremely busy shipping port, making it unsuitable as a subs base.
And I think it's been picked for pork barrelling reasons. It's a pre-election announcement that offers the prospect of jobs and economic activity.
Federal Labor says it'll act to address the GP shortage in the Hunter by making the region a distribution priority area, providing more access to doctors. Liz Farquhar reports.
Labor's health spokesman Mark Butler will be in Windale today to announce his party's plan to fix the GP shortage in the Hunter. He says the Morrison government's decision to reclassify the region as metropolitan means it's never been harder or more expensive for people in the Hunter to see a doctor. He says a Labor government would make the region a distribution priority area, providing access to the bonded medical program, which supports medical students at university in exchange for working in regional areas. It would also provide more access to overseas trained doctors. Labor has already committed to boosting funding for the Hunter's GP Access After Hours program.
A coal market analyst says the unprecedented price of thermal coal is unlikely to inspire any significant investment in new coal mines. The Newcastle index price has been hovering around a record $250 a tonne, but late last week skyrocketed to above $400 a tonne. The surge came as some European buyers sought to divest themselves of Russian coal due to its invasion of Ukraine. Rory Symington from Wood Mackenzie says there's still a reluctance to invest in new coal mines, and he doesn't expect that to change.
Certainly, the high prices that we've seen over the last year will be getting people thinking, but I think there's still a lot of reluctance out there just because the situation is so fluid and so uncertain.
The Weather Bureau says the Hunter River at Singleton will exceed the minor flood level this morning and could reach the major flood level of 13 metres tomorrow. Local lucerne farmer Chris Kelly has been preparing since Sunday and has moved some of his equipment to higher ground. He says it's hard to predict how the river will be impacted.
Sunday morning, I woke up and noticed the river was getting quite high to a point that we've got to pull our pumps. So, came in Sunday morning, we pulled the pumps out of the river, put it on higher ground, that you could rest easy then. And just going off what the information we've been fed, we've decided to move everything to higher ground again.
Major flooding is occurring along the Wallumbye Brook at Bulga, and it's expected to peak near 6.2 metres this afternoon. The river is expected to remain above the major flood level of 4.6 metres until tomorrow. Minor flooding may occur along the Upper Hunter River at Muswellbrook, Aberdeen and Denman. Dungog Shire Council has established an evacuation centre should it be needed due to flooding. The centre is located at the Dungog Memorial RSL Club on Lord Street and will be staffed 24 hours a day. Animal safe places have also opened at the Gresford Showground and Dungog Sale Yards for any pet owners and producers who need to evacuate stock. The Weather Bureau says there is minor flooding occurring along the Williams River at Dungog, which peaked at 6.25 metres early this morning and is now falling. A Muswellbrook woman is planning a donation drive to support the farming community in northern New South Wales after the devastating floods. Nellie Witt is looking to collect supplies in the coming weeks to donate to farmers on properties that were damaged. Ms Witt says a lot of Hunter residents want to show solidarity with Lismore.
This area had a bit of an insight of what the floods are like. For those who have an agricultural background, it's going to take a long time for the land to recover from such a massive event. So if there's any farmers out there that think they could spare a couple of bales or whatever that we could run, that would be amazing.
Checking the Hunters' weather, a severe weather warning for damaging winds and heavy rainfall has been issued. Newcastle, Maitland and Singleton are all expecting a top of 27 degrees. You're listening to ABC News.